Nigeria's HIV and AIDS prevalence rate as at 2014 stood at 3.17%, and the government has entered into a partnership with the United States to conduct the Nigeria HIV and AIDS Indicator and Assessment Survey, which is expected to give precision and direction to all HIV and AIDS-related activities in Nigeria. My guest on this week's episode of the program gives the rationale behind the survey. Hello there, welcome to Dateline Abuja. I'm Gloria Umezuke. Nigeria has the second largest number of people living with HIV and AIDS, with about 3 million people estimated to be living with the infection. In 2016, Nigeria had 220,000 new HIV infections and 160,000 AIDS-related deaths. Well, we had a conversation with the Director General of the National Agency for the Control of AIDS on a proposed survey on the HIV and AIDS status in the country. But first, what are the stories that made headlines within the week in the nation's capital? The not-too-young Duran coalition are giving President Buhari a deadline of May 29, 2018 to give his assent to the age reduction bill, which they claim has been on his desk for the past 2 weeks. The convener of the group, Mr. Samson Itodo, stated this at a press conference in Abuja. You may recall that the National Assembly had in July 2017 passed the age reduction bill and transmitted the constitutional amendment bills to the 36 state houses of assembly, where it received affirmative votes from 24 states. The bill was then transmitted to the National Assembly, after which it was forwarded to the President for assent. The group believes that a delay in the assent could rob many young politicians of the opportunities to contest in the 2019 elections.
This delay is threatening the political aspiration of credible and competent young Nigerians who should be encouraged to participate in the process. We will conclude by May 29th that if the President does not assent to this, then we'll have no choice but to conclude that this is a deliberate attempt to keep young people out of the political process.
Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo wants the National Boundary Commission to re-engineer the nation's borders and border policies in order to appropriately deal with issues of boundary disputes, communal clashes, smuggling, among others. The Vice President was speaking at a retreat for stakeholders on management of Nigeria's boundaries, which comes weeks after the inauguration of 6 board members from the Commission, approved by the President, to work in line with the fight against corruption and international best practices.
What happens along these borders greatly affects what happens within them. And all you need is a cursory look at the daily news headlines to realize just how much of the issues they embody are determined by the activities taking place across our land and maritime borders and boundaries, whether it is smuggling or oil bunkering, illegal oil bunkering, or the impact of undocumented immigration on the security situation, especially in the north-central states of Nigeria. It is time to re-engineer our border, all of our border policies, and I believe that this is the paramount responsibility of this commission, and we trust that you will deliver.
The Catholic Mission Abuja joined other members across the country in a nationwide prayer and peaceful protest against incessant killings by suspected herdsmen. The protest is in compliance with the directive of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, asking all its members to participate in a nationwide supplication to God for the killings and particularly the murder of 2 Catholic priests in Benue last month.
The government should reach out to the governments of Libya and Mali that they have named as culprits, so that we find either diplomatic solutions to the crisis at home or we engage our military.
We are calling on the government to rise up to their responsibility.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank left all rates unchanged for the 16th time in a row at the end of its two-day rate-setting meeting. Briefing the media after the meeting, the governor of the Apex Bank, Mr. Govt, explains that the decision stems from fears of budget implementation and effects of election spendings. Mr. Emefiele, however, listed some interventions by the bank to maintain fiscal and monetary policy in the country.
Concerned that the delay in the passage of the 2018 Appropriation Act bill could derail it and urge the federal government to sustain its implementation to further accelerate the economic recovery thus far achieved. The committee also urged the government to set the machinery in place for effective implementation of the 2018 budget to further stimulate the economy.
President Muhammadu Buhari has queried the over $16 billion spent on power projects in the country, with nothing to show for it. In a reference to a former president, President Buhari said one of the former heads of state was bragging that he spent more than $16 billion on power in Nigeria. Where is the power? He asked.
And one of the former heads of state between that time was bragging that he spent more than 15 billion American dollars, not naira, on power. Where is the power? Now we have to pay the debt. And this year's and last year's budget I took to the National Assembly was the highest in capital projects, more than 1.3 trillion naira.
President Muhammadu Buhari has met with a 9-member committee from the Senate set up to look into allegations leveled against the Inspector General of Police by the Senate President. Senate Majority Leader Ahmed Lawan told State House correspondents after the closed-door meeting that the President has promised to prevail on the matter as they discussed ways to refine the relationship between the executive and legislature, amongst other issues.
We have so many other issues that border on ensuring that we work better with the executive arm of government. So the IGP was just one of those issues that were discussed.
The Senate and heads of security agencies in the country have agreed on the need for special funding for security agencies in Nigeria. This is part of the resolution reached at a private meeting between the Senate and security chiefs at the National Assembly. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Abayomi Olonisaki, who led the delegation to the Senate, was accompanied by the Director General of the Department of State Services, Mr. Lawan Daura, as well as representatives of the Nigeria Customs Service, the Immigration, and the Nigerian Police. Speaking after the meeting, Senate President Dr. Bukola Saraki said the Senate and service chiefs discussed the funding challenges confronting security agencies and resolved that the agencies will bring the request for the special funding in 2 weeks. This special funding, which is expected to come as a supplementary budget, is separate from the $1 billion requested by President Muhammadu Buhari for security.
The Senate, in a closed committee of the whole, received briefs from the Chief of Defense Staff, the Director General of the Department of State Services, representative of the Comptroller General of Immigration, Inspector General of Police, Comptroller General of Customs, on the proliferation of dangerous arms, spate of killings by terrorists, kidnapping by hoodlums across the country. And we also agreed that there must be made special funding, and also to give them 2 weeks for which to present their own budget on this area of special funding that we think will go a long way to improve the security situation in the country.
A total of 701 billion naira has been allocated for distribution to the federal, state and local governments for the month of April, while gross statutory revenue for the same month rose to 613 billion naira. Well, speaking after the monthly Federation Accounts Allocation Committee meeting, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Mahmoud Isaduse, explains that the figure shows an increase from the 626 billion naira disbursed in March. On the remittance of revenues from the NNPC and other revenue-generating agencies, which has generated some controversy, Mr. Issa Duse says talks are ongoing to reconcile the payments of the differentials.
The federal government got a share of 276.5 billion, states 140.26 billion, local governments 108 billion, and then states under the derivation principle got 49.75 billion. Discussion is ongoing between NPC and all the interested parties to resolve all matters.